Oh, they're doing it for us, it looks like. I don't know.
If you're the first person in the room, please start a sign-in sheet, then put it on my desk after the conference. That will be great. Otherwise, you will not get credit for it. I don't want that for you. All right.
You got a piece of paper?
Yeah, I do. Well, a few, as a matter of fact. So
She said just put our name.
that's what it says. Name.
It looks like they're doing it.
Oh,
Is there any way we can turn the volume up?
go for it, man.
I got it.
All
Here.
right. Name.
You can slide it in your pocket, or it's got a clip. You can put it in your waistband, whatever works.
All right, that'll work. Thank you. All right. Good morning. How are you guys today? Everybody awake? I'm Stacy Sotovia. I'm one of the faculty in internal medicine, and this is the GME patient safety series. Today we're going to talk about medical errors. Who was here with me last month? Okay, a couple of people. So I'm a hospitalist with SIU, so some of you guys look familiar from being in the hospital. That's part of my work. A majority of my work is doing quality improvement for the Department of Medicine, so I think a lot about projects and patient safety and do a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. And then the other half of my job is I'm the medical director for continuing professional development here in the building. So we think about conferences, and I know that some of you were with us last week at the MHQA conference, Fundamentally Human. Really good, successful day. So today we're going to talk about medical errors, and we're gonna talk to each other, okay? Not just me, because it's 7 o'clock in the morning, and that's hard to do. So let's start out with this. There are a lot of ways to think about medical errors and patient safety. And this I want to show you is if you just look at a Twitter feed, type in medical errors, you're going to see all kinds of things. Some things are junk, obviously. Some things are very good. Johns Hopkins is partnering with Microsoft to think about how all devices and organizations talk to each other. Okay? This is not always an intuitive thing. We have 3 EHRs in the community right now that are attempting to talk to each other, and it's difficult. Okay? So they're partnering with Microsoft. We're going to talk about an FMEA. Do you guys know what that is? Okay, we're going to talk about that in the analysis part of today. But just so you know, there are certainly lots of good sources of information as well when you're talking about medical errors and patient safety. The Virginia Mason Institute is one of the leading organizations in the country for patient safety. Dean Olson with the SJR did a review, did a couple of articles actually on the MHQA conference that we had last week. We were fortunate to have Gordon Schiff here, who's from Harvard, and he actually wrote part of the Institute of Medicine report that just came out. Do you guys know what that report's about? Okay. Remember in 1999, the Institute of Medicine report came out to say to err is human, okay, and it told us how much harm we cause, preventable harm in hospitals every year. Do you guys remember what the number is? How many people die in hospitals every year that are unanticipated? This is kind of what launched the current patient safety movement. It was 100,000 lives, okay? And shortly after that came the 100,000 Lives campaign and on and on. It spurred lots of work. The Institute of Medicine hasn't done a big report since then. Until a couple of weeks ago, they released a report about diagnostic error. Okay, so you're going to hear a lot about diagnostic error and how we prevent that in the future. Those of you who were here with me last month, we touched on that briefly, and I said there was a link. The Institute of Medicine is linked to Springfield. Anybody know how? So this is a bit of a tangent. You guys all look, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry you have to be here with me. You guys all look very unhappy. The Institute of Medicine, anybody know what that is? Do we respect them or not respect them? Is it like reading USA Today? The Institute of Medicine is kind of big, right? It's an organization that we really respect. It's actually a division of the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, okay? They're a non-for-profit organization. They, depending on what kind of work they're doing, they pluck experts from all over the country to solve really complex problems. And that's why they're thinking about diagnostic error. So the tangent here is the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine was actually written into law by Abraham Lincoln. 1863, okay? There was a lot going on then, and he had the foresight to institute this. So that's sort of the local trivia. And so that's a review of diagnostic error in the Institute of Medicine report that we had. We're going to talk about an FMEA. But first, since we really need it.
This patient has a fractured fibula in the mouse center. So he can be able to go on tomorrow.
He's gonna be so excited. That killed him.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. Dr. Barbara Palmer.
Have you guys seen that before? Okay. So it looks like they did something really bad, right? But they didn't. Is that so we can sort of start thinking about errors and harm. Not everything that looks like a mistake is a mistake, okay? Not everything that looks like an error is an error. Even if we make mistakes, not everything that we make a mistake at causes harm to the patient, okay? And, you know, before you feel sort of discouraged about this talk, I want you to realize that most people in medicine are doing very good work every single day, okay? And the things that happen, happen. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how we deal with those things. Well, we probably don't want to watch any of those. Okay. So our objectives today are pretty simple. I want to shed some light on a few things for you. We're going to talk about, in terms of medical errors, we're going to talk about reporting, analyzing, and disclosing. Okay, 3 very big topics today. So a medical error happens. Now what do you do? Has anybody been involved in an error? You guys are better residents than I was. Has anything gone as not as intended? Anybody want to share an example?
I mean, there's things I would consider an error, like give a wrong dose of warfarin.
Okay.
Like I think in a case that warfarin needs to be given
Okay.
because we were expecting cardiovascular clearance, didn't happen, and we assumed that the procedure won't be done to give warfarin, and it wasn't given. That includes patient risk for the blood clots, and procedure wasn't done.
Okay. So medication errors are incredibly common, right? Communication errors or issues between providers are incredibly common. Is the procedure going to happen, not happen? Are we holding medicine or are we not holding medicine? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So there are sort of 2 types of errors that happen. One is, you know, we do something so bad or wrong that the patient notices. Okay, the patient notices right away. And there are certainly harms in medicine where the patient notices right away. Okay, and then there are things where the patient doesn't notice and may not ever really know. Okay, for example, the patient has a penicillin allergy, and I prescribe penicillin. Okay. Now, maybe the patient had a documented penicillin allergy, nothing happens to them, but I gave it to them and that was wrong, okay? They may not ever know that that happened, but I made an error, okay? So that happens. What do you do? What do I do? We'll talk about me. What do I do? What's the first step? Good. Okay. Remove the harm. Okay. Good. What's next? I have a little person at home. I am incredibly patient. I'll wait and wait and wait until somebody talks.
Treat harm.
Okay. Yeah. First things first. You have to make sure that if there is harm, you're treating it, resolving it. Okay.
And tell the patient.
Okay. Tell the patient, and we'll come to that. What else? So this happened to me 6 months ago or so. I had a patient who went down for thoracentesis, a diagnostic thoracentesis, and came back with a pneumothorax. Okay, and so I talked to the patient about it. Okay, but what else do I need to do? Is there anybody else I need to tell? Tell my friends, tell my family.
It needs to be reported, but I'm not sure who.
Good. We report it. All right. Objective number 1 today, reporting. So let's talk about that. Who needs to know?
Well, I tell my attending first, and they can direct me where to go.
Exactly right. Yeah. Attending should always be willing to help in that situation for sure. Let's say that you're running a hospital, okay, and you find out that radiology gave an, iatrogenic pneumothorax on Monday. Is that the only time it's happened? It hasn't happened the whole year except Monday. Are you sure? How are you going to know if it's happened any more than that? People have to tell you, right? So you have an obligation to tell the system, okay, so that they can know if this is a pattern or not. So the pneumothorax that I had was the 4th one that week. Okay, so there was an issue that needed to be addressed. Okay, and when we reported it, they knew that we had a pattern. If I had never reported it, it may have been only one. If I hadn't reported and other people hadn't reported. Okay, so it's important for the system to know. How do you tell the system? Anybody know? You guys practice in 2 hospitals and an outpatient setting. You can tell you're attending, but how else do you report errors or near misses? Things that almost made it to the patient but not quite. You sure can, absolutely. And all hospitals have if a hospital doesn't have a way to report medical errors, you shouldn't be working there. Okay, so if you're interviewing at hospitals in the next few years and they don't have a mechanism for reporting errors or acting on errors, don't practice there. You don't want to be a part of it. So every hospital has a reporting mechanism, okay, and I think actually by law they have to. So Memorial system is called Sensor, and when you're on the physician portal, there's a big icon there. There's a big banner piece that says Sensor. Okay, and the O looks like a target. At Saints, it's called incident reporting. Okay, at SIU, soon, in the next few months, it's going to be Sensor for SIU. Okay, we're using the same product that Memorial is using. And there are 2 ways to report. You can report confidentially or anonymously. What seems better to you? What do you think? Anonymously? That feels a little bit better, doesn't it? Why might confidentially be better? Exactly right. If they need to get more of the story or understand who were all these people that are involved. Good, that's really important stuff. Is anybody concerned about reporting confidentially rather than anonymously? Ready? Okay. So most of the medical errors that happen are not, and we talked a little bit about this before, they're mistakes, they're slips, they're lapses, okay? There was an issue in communication, there was an issue in follow-through. There's almost always an issue. It's not because the person who committed the error was malintended. Okay, if you come to work intoxicated, okay, or otherwise under the influence of some other substance, if you come to work knowingly wanting to harm somebody, or accepting much greater risk than you should, then that's a violation, and you should, whoever that commits an error in that sort of situation should be punished for their behavior, right? Because that's deviant behavior. We don't have those people in medicine for the most part, okay? People don't come to work wanting to hurt somebody. So beyond that, the errors are really taken in that context. So confidential reporting is much better than anonymous reporting. If I'm running a healthcare organization and I know that a nurse gave a fatal dose of a medication, and I know that it was a mistake, she didn't mean to, he didn't mean to, what's my response as a system to that person? Or what should it be? And we'll,
Find out why how that happened.
okay, good. So we're going to move into the analysis piece of it. So it happened, and we report it. Okay, you report it as quickly as you can, so that everybody can sort of mobilize to make things happen. If it's something really bad, okay, heaven forbid, you're going to the administration and saying, hey, this just happened. Okay. If it's not so, you know, I had a patient who I went to check on, and he was on 3B rehab and had some wraps on his legs, and the wrap hadn't been taken off for about a week when I went to see him, and I took it off, and it was a bad situation. They were supposed to be taken off every night. The order was misread, and they stayed on. Things like that you can report online. Okay, you can talk to the managers, let them know, and then put in an official report. Where does the report go after you submit it online? Any idea? Where you submit it in the physician portal. Who's looking at it? Who's thinking about it? And this is important for you to feel comfortable doing it, okay? The people in an organization that see the most harm or the most potential for error are the people with the least experience. A lot of times that's you guys, okay? And you spend a lot of time in the hospital. You see these things happen more so than people like me who have been around for a little while. It becomes part of our landscape, okay? You guys are a little more hypervigilant, and you see things happen. So reporting from you guys is incredibly important. So where does it go after you submit it? Any idea?
Quality improvement.
Bingo. It doesn't go to risk management. Okay? It goes to quality improvement. It goes to performance improvement. It goes to the people who focus on patient safety. Okay? The people who have the ability to change the system if it needs to be changed, and to put safeguards in place. Okay? Depending on how severe the error is or what the impact to the patient is, there may be other people involved as well. There may be risk managers or risk mitigators involved. There may be administrators involved. Okay? And we'll get into that in a few minutes. So it comes here, and we score it. Not me personally. The group of people who do this, they score it. And they use something called an FMEA. Anybody? I already covered. Nobody knows that. FMEA, Failure Modes Effect Analysis. Okay? Basically, it's a way to take an event, attach some scores to it in terms of severity and how likely it is to happen again. Okay? So if you have something that's fairly severe, fairly common, and can happen over and over again, that gets resources attached to it. Okay? And you move forward with it. Have any of you guys been invited to be on a root cause analysis? Yeah? Okay. Do you want to tell these guys a little bit about what you did? You don't have to discuss the case, but...
Okay. I told another resident were there for a particular ER case over at Saints. Basically, the ER staff that was involved, physician and nurses were there, and the risk management people just kind of going over the situation. And they asked us at the end, kind of, what are some things that we see if you guys think we could have changed?
Okay.
But we weren't directly involved in what happened.
Okay, good. So root cause analysis is a really effective tool that we use to analyze an error that happens, so a medical error. And what the people who run these root cause analyses do is they'll often interview everybody who was involved privately, kind of reassure them that it's okay, and that things are going to be okay, and get their story. And then they compile sort of a timeline and some of the factors that went into the event, and then they invite everybody to come together and talk about it. And so there can be administrators, the physicians involved, the nurses, pharmacy often, therapists, sometimes patients, okay? And you talk about big categories of things, and this is the fishbone diagram. You guys have seen that before, the Ishikawa diagram, where you think about this was the outcome, and what are the things that led to the outcome. So what was it about the patient that led to this outcome? What was it about the caregiver, the local environment, the IT system that led to this outcome? Okay, so we use that as a tool, and then sometimes we'll use the 5 whys as well. So if it was, a delayed diagnosis in the ER, for example, well, why was it delayed? Well, because we were understaffed. Well, why were you understaffed? We were understaffed because 5 people called in. Well, why did 5 people call in? Oh, because they were angry. Well, why are people angry? And so you can keep drilling down at the end using the fishbone diagram, using perhaps the 5 whys. You're going to walk out of there with a whole different set of reasons than what you walked in with, okay? And you're often going to walk out of there with having identified some issues within the system that you can address, okay? So rather than firing the person that had a delay in diagnosis, okay, or a delay in treating the patient, you actually are fixing a lot of these things. So we have a cultural issue, we have a management issue, and, people continue to call off because they're unhappy at work. And we need to fix this so that we have a good, competent staff, okay? And so the response when you come out of a root cause analysis might be very different than what you went in with. And then you actually have the people who are involved in the day-to-day care in the system influencing the way things change. Does that make sense? So if you ever get asked to be on a root cause analysis, do it, okay, so that you get a sense for what it's like. And the GME office maintains a list. The hospitals call the GME office and say, we have a root cause analysis, will you send some residents, just so that you guys can get a sense for what it's all about before you actually do it as an attending, okay, because you will be involved. You take care of lots of patients and things go wrong, even if you weren't directly responsible. Your input is still really important. So that's the analysis piece of a medical error. Okay. So let's move on to here. So do you disclose the error to the patient? Yes? No? Wait and see if they notice? We should let them know. Okay. Even if there was no harm? No harm, no foul? Everybody's nodding. Some people not sure? Depends? Okay. What do you worry about when you disclose a medical error?
Litigation.
You worry about litigation. Good. And we'll come back to that because that's incredibly important and we need to talk about it. What else do you worry about?
We will worry about, I was thinking about the same, but at the same time, disclosing easy that is less likely to be sued.
Okay.
Or like, I remember once I hear that it goes in favor of the decision in the court to disclose that.
Okay. What's everybody else think?
The outcome as well,
Okay.
part of the communication. Something wrong happened,
Okay.
and you have to explain the most clear possible what happened for this reason.
So let's say we do a wrong site.
And,
procedure or surgery, okay? And I'm not picking on the surgeons. There's a Colorado physician study. It was the largest malpractice insurer in Colorado a few years ago looked at the claims, and they were doing voluntary early reporting. So anytime something happened to a physician, if you called them early and you were incentivized for early reporting, basically. And so there were several wrong site, wrong patient events. The only death in that 3 or 4 year period was actually attributed to an internist, okay, who did a wrong side thoracentesis, caused a pneumothorax, and the patient died. There weren't any other patient deaths related to the other wrong site stuff. So it's not just, that doesn't just happen to surgeons, that happens to anybody who does a procedure, okay? Laterality is an issue. So let's say we do a wrong site deal, whatever it is, procedure, surgery. What do you worry about in disclosing? You obviously have to disclose. What do you worry about? Litigation, what else?
I think a patient can take it two ways when you tell them. They can either say, you're incompetent, I'll never come back to this hospital again. Or they can say, so they screwed up, but they were willing to own it. And so that gives me more faith in them that they'll be honest with me.
Okay. What do you guys think?
The reason we don't tell them is pride. We're expecting to be them and not screw up.
You got it. And that often is the very first barrier, okay, to disclosing, is the fact that I made a mistake, or I hurt somebody, I made an error. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get sued. Oh my gosh, all of this, it's like an avalanche, okay? But first, it's wow, I can't believe that happened to me, and I have to tell them, okay? So this is really important, and we're going to come back to the provider piece. We're going to come back to the litigation piece. Let's talk about what patients need when there's been a medical error. They want to know, right? And what do patients most often want? There are two things. They want an apology, okay? And that's human, okay? If something goes wrong with me, I want somebody to apologize, okay? Just say you're sorry. It almost doesn't matter if it's your fault or not, okay? When something goes wrong to you, you just want an apology, okay? So patients want an apology. What else?
To know how you're going to fix it so it doesn't happen again.
Bingo. They want all the information, and they want to know what you're going to do with it, okay? They want reassurance that it's not going to happen to somebody else. Do they want to sue? No. Has anybody been involved in a lawsuit? No. Anybody in your family? And I don't have that experience either. But I can tell you that it's, in listening to people describe this, it is an emotional roller coaster. It is an absolute wreck. The compensation almost isn't worth it, okay, what you have to go through to litigate. It's really awful. So patients don't really want to sue. Why do they sue us when something goes wrong?
Because they didn't get what they wanted. They didn't get that knowledge. They didn't get information.
They show up at the lawyer's office and they say, I want to find out what really happened. Okay? They're hiding something from me. I want you to figure it out. Okay? Does that make sense? It's not very often that they say, I want that person to pay for what they did to me. Okay? It's, I want information. However, that is sort of, is couched. Good. So when you're thinking about disclosure, how many people have been trained about how to disclose a medical error? Raise your hand high. Who's been trained on how to do that? Okay, good. Nobody else? Okay. So what do you do? Okay. It's always a good idea to have your attending. And I'll tell you, most attendings are not taught how to do it either. Okay? My approach is pretty simple. I go in and I tell the patient what happened, even if it's not my error. Something happened. Go in and I'm pretty straight up about, listen, this happened. It's not what we intended. It's not how we thought it would go. But this is what happened. And I'm really sorry. And I'm going to get you more information as I find out more information. And I'll let you know exactly how this happened. Okay? Patients are angry. Patients are upset. It's like delivering bad news. You can't just do it and then walk away. Okay? You stay, you listen, you own it, you're part of it. You go away, you come back. Okay? And it's a process. It happens again and again. If it's something really bad, the organization has a response too. So how do organizations respond? If we do a wrong site surgery, for example, and those still happen. We've had 2 in the last year. So what do? What does the organization do? They go in and they say they're sorry. We're sorry this happened to you. This is not the way we wanted things to go. They apologize, they offer information, and then they provide an offer. Okay? What's the offer? It's usually 2 pieces. And organizations that do this well, their liability goes down dramatically. They pay for it. This happened to you, we're going to compensate you. However much is decided. And they just pay. Okay? If it's a bad deal, that's what you do. You just pay. You don't wait for it to go to litigation. You don't wait. And so it's not drawn out. You just do it. Okay? I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I'm going to pay this, all of this. Okay? And organizations that have done that have been really successful. Does that make sense? Is that a surprise to you that people do that? No? Okay. So let's talk about a couple of things, and then we're going to watch a video. I just wanted to tell you about the VA system. They were actually the first system to disclose, apologize, and offer. Okay, that's what those 3 things are called. And they published their results. And they found that they dropped from being the top quartile of liability payments down to the bottom quartile of liability payments compared to peers. Okay, so from an organization standpoint, this makes a lot of sense to do. University of Michigan, which has they've gotten tremendous attention for the way that they do this. Their liability payouts and legal costs associated with defense attorneys dropped by 60% over a 5-year period of time. And the 30% decrease in the claims they were paying or defending related to medical errors. Okay, so it's effective. If patients get an apology, patients get information, they're less likely to litigate. But that's not the only reason why we disclose. Patients need to know what's happening. Patients need to be reassured that it's not going to happen again. And they want to know how the system's going to evolve or change so that it doesn't. And so a lot of times we invite those patients or family members to be involved in the change teams that are changing the process so that they can actually see it happen. Okay? It's pretty therapeutic and can be very powerful to the staff who are working with them. It provides closure for everybody. But what about physicians? What helps physicians after a medical error? We care about what happens to the patient in the system. But what about physicians?
some questions like, there's several mistakes are unintentionally. I mean, that's we talk mainly about. If there's several of those mistakes have fatal outcomes.
Right.
So, what kind of support system are available?
Good.
And what about if medical career is over? What's next after that situation?
Yeah. What do you guys think? What resources are available? Do we need resources, or are we tough enough to handle it? Tough enough to handle it was 15 years ago. Resources today. Okay? There are lots of stories of physicians who develop post-traumatic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders from a fatal medical error. Okay? Lucian Leap, do you guys know that guy, or have you heard that name? Famous guy in patient safety. He's a Harvard guy. He's a pediatric surgeon, and he tells the story about a young girl who died in his care. He was delaying surgery because he thought she would get better, and she died. And so he talks about how he left medicine for a few years, and was just kind of a lost soul for a while. And so that doesn't just happen to us, that happens to the nurses who are involved too. Okay? So you have to think about the care team. There's a really great article, and it's called Wisdom in Medicine, What Helps Physicians After a Medical Error. And they define wisdom as the integration of cognitive, compassion, and reflection components of personalities. And people who scored highly and were sort of wisdom exemplars on the psychology scale did better after a medical error. Do you know what helped them? What helped these people? What did they seek out that helped them handle this?
I would guess like any other cognitive therapy, talk about it.
Yep. Talking about it's number one. Talking about it. Disclosure and apology. Okay? Some of these physicians talk about going back to see family members of the patient who died months later, and it helped. It helped them, it helped the family. So talking about it, disclosure and apology, forgiveness, okay, helps. A moral context, so people who are sort of morally grounded anyway, or have some spiritual outlet, handle these better. Prevention, being involved in teaching and helping to prevent future errors was very therapeutic. And improving teamwork, becoming an expert. Interestingly, of the people who were sort of wisdom exemplars, and this is like 8 to 10 years after the fatal event happened to a physician, 80% of those physicians had disclosed to the patient right away that it happened. And this was 10 years ago. Okay, this is before we were talking about it's okay from a litigation standpoint to say you're sorry. Okay, we expect you to say you're sorry. You have a moral obligation to say you're sorry. Okay, and we go as far as that. 10 years ago, we didn't. This is something we didn't talk about. And so these physicians, 80% of them had disclosed. They were exemplars. Only 20% of the non-exemplars didn't disclosed. Okay, so there's therapy for the physician in disclosing the event. If you don't disclose it, you're paying for it 10 years later too. Make sense? And the less than 10% of physicians reported having disclosure training or knowing how to do it. And just so you know, we have teams of people who help with this. Okay, especially at Memorial, we have patient advocates, we have administrators, we have clergy. All of those people help us when we need to disclose something that's difficult. Only 10% of people who had training, and of all of these 166 fatal events, only 10% went to litigation. Okay, and none of the errors that were disclosed went to litigation. pretty powerful numbers when you think about it, and pretty reassuring when you're on that end going in to say you're sorry. There's no downside to that. Does that make sense? Does everybody agree? Okay. We've got a few more minutes. We're going to watch a quick video. This is a TED Talk from University of Nevada.
The nurse grabbed the recliner and jerked me away. I heard code blue and the room filled with people. In that instant, I knew he was gone. The doctor's words attempted optimism, but their faces betrayed them. The next hours were awful. My sweet boy had become a corpse hooked to machines. I sat next to him, begging him to come back to me. But really, I wanted to flee. I didn't want any of this to be happening. I wanted to wake up stiff and uncomfortable in that ugly blue chair and realize it all was just a very bad dream. But this was far worse than a nightmare. My 20-month-old son had just died in one of the country's leading hospitals. On Thursday, he was sick, and on Tuesday, he was dead. That night, when he had been admitted to the hospital, white circles with wires were stuck onto Gabriel's bare little chest to monitor his breathing and heartbeat. Every time he made the slightest little wiggle, the alarms would go off, and really loud. Every time we would almost be asleep, the racket and worry would start all over again. We'd already spent sleepless days and nights in my local hospital, where he had been misdiagnosed again and again. But now, we were in a university hospital for children. Finally, here, I felt safe and very heavy. And I'm sure the nurse could see how tired I was, and she wanted to take care of me too. So she did the logical thing. She turned off the alarms on the machine next to his bed. And I thanked her when she did it. I was so grateful for the prospect of silence and sleep. Later, doctors and administrators from the hospital would explain that actually, unknowingly, she had done a lot more. She hadn't just turned the racket off in the room. She turned off all of the alarms everywhere. In his room, at the nurse's station, and on her patient.
So unintentional. Right?
Later, the manufacturers of the monitors would explain they didn't think anyone would go through the trouble of 7 screens to turn off all of the alarms. So they didn't include a failsafe to stop her.
System failure?
Really wrong. So when Gabriel's heart stopped beating, there was no sound. Just quiet. Nothing woke me until several minutes had passed, and I was being jerked away, and the room filled with people and panic. Imagine if you were that nurse, if you had done what she had done. You're doing your job, a demanding job, an important job, and you do something that causes someone to die. A beautiful child dies because you think you're doing a good thing. Then your shift is over, and you have to look his mother in the eye and tell her goodbye. And the next day, you're expected to go back to your job, carry on, go about your business, all the while hoping and trusting that nothing else terrible happens.
The conference is about to end.
Do that job. I'm not that brave. My response response to what happened to Gabriel is not unique. Like most people who have experienced errors in medical care, we want three things. We want an honest, transparent explanation of what has happened. We want a full apology, and we want to know and see that changes have been made to ensure that what has happened to us never happens to anyone else. Unlike what we can see nightly in television courtroom dramas, people don't immediately seek lawyers. We want answers, not money. People hire lawyers because they feel deceived and abandoned. It is a very emotionally and financially expensive last resort that none of us want to do. And the thing is, we all make mistakes. It's just that for most of us, the consequences are pretty small. I don't hit the submit button in my online banking account, and the power company gets paid right now. Or I forget that on Wednesdays, school gets out early, and my daughter's annoyed when I'm late to that. You know, pretty used to that. We all know that the power company doesn't expect a whole lot from me. And I hope my daughter knows that though I may be late, she also knows I'm always going to be there. But we expect so much more from people in medicine. We trust them with what we value the most, our lives and our loved ones, and then expect impossible perfection. We want the human element when it means kindness and compassion, like the nurse trying to give us a couple hours of sleep, but we deny it when it means possible failure. We're never going to have it take place. The day after he died, Gabriel's nurse left that hospital for good. I hope she was not fired. Legally, I cannot be told, but I know she never returned to that children's hospital. I get it. I wouldn't be able to go back there either. And one of the pediatric neurosurgeons who took care of Gabriel, he later quit practicing medicine altogether. All of their expertise and wisdom and experience is no longer holding. That is another tragedy and another very expensive system failure.
What do you guys think?
She's obviously had time to process this and have a lot of insight.
Yeah, and you know that very good observation, because initially when something happens and you disclose an error, I mean it's gonna be bad. You know, this is years afterwards, or most likely years afterwards, right? That people are able to put together a coherent and thoughtful dialogue about what happened. That's not the case initially, and you know that just adds to the grief and the stress for those caretakers as well. Okay, because you're not telling this person, you know, you're telling a mom of a baby who just died. That's a very different thing. Yeah. So that's why we have to take care of the people around us who are involved in medical errors. Okay, the nursing staff, the physicians, and we have to take care of them in an ongoing way. Okay, so to back up, this is why the system needs to know about errors. This is why the system needs to know about very small errors. Okay, because very small errors that are ignored over time become big ones. Okay, things that are not catastrophic, if they continue to happen, at some point they're going to cause harm. Okay, so we want those near misses. Those are perfect opportunities. Things that are errors that don't cause harm, we want to know about so that we can, you know, play the catastrophe in our mind and prevent them. Okay, so we want